Good afternoon and welcome to our 18th lecture. We are finally getting into the trimming and the details of the pathological hoof. Now that we have so long labored on understanding what all is going on and how to put it all together, I have two sessions to share with you some general thoughts, and this session in particular will be a little bit shorter. I tried very hard to spread the information out in any other way, and it just could not be done. And instead of just filling the time with nonsense, we're going to make it a little shorter today. There's plenty of time to discuss things afterwards if you wish to do this, and then we are going to have maybe in the future a little bit longer sessions. The material today is very important to start to understand what happens when things go wrong and what to do about it. And this is something that is very close to every trimmer's heart. So let's talk today about contraction, including navicular syndrome, general thoughts, and classification and prevention. Shoeing and or incorrect trimming of unshod hoofs, combined with a lack of sufficient movement or unsuitable ground, causes what is commonly known as contracted hoofs. In our school of thinking, we divide contractions into many different chapters. All these can also come as combinations. Often one will not be possible without the other. While we will talk about all the contractions in the future in detail, I will just show them, name them here, so you can see that this chapter is a bit more complicated than it first appeared. And putting this all into a meaningful succession really requires that we are taking this a little bit slow. Heel contraction is the most recognized. Heel contractions also recognized by other schools as a contraction. The heels are narrow. The wall often comes around the back of the hoof. This is the hoof that you see on the left side, very contracted, should be every trimmer's nightmare. On the right side, you see a little bit when we are talking about heel contraction. The green line would be a more ideal shape, would be a more functioning shape. And the red line runs along the collateral grooves. And if that line that runs along the collateral grooves does not come out outside of the hoof bulbs, as the green line does, then we are dealing with a contracted heel. Bar contraction is the second one. And they are in no particular order. This is just the way we deal with it, one after another. Bar contraction means when the bar is either laid over the sole or is protruding above the level of the wall. Also when the bar is too long, running forward around the frog. And we have here two pictures to depict bar contraction. The one on the left side, that of an actually trimmed hoof, And if you follow my red line here, you have bar all the way to here. And on the other side, it is all the way to here. So all this is bar. And as you know from the anatomy lectures, the bar corium ends in the middle of the frog, or about there, somewhere in this area. So anything that goes forward of this is too much and is known as bar contraction. The other scenario is this here on the right side, on this hoof, where the bar actually is long too, but it is laid over sideways. All of this here is bar. And it has, instead of coming straight out of the hoof, it's laying over on the sole, and that has its own problems. And I'm here only to classify this, not to talk about the specific problems. The third contraction is underslung heel contraction. When the heels are underslung, that means that they are not standing upright enough to support the back of the hoof. And when you draw a line along the toe line and then draw a line along the heel line, and these two lines are converging, that means they get more and more narrow here, then you are dealing with an underslung heel. If those lines are diverging, they're getting farther and farther apart, as it is shown here with the green line, then the hoof is diverging and it is working well. The fourth contraction is sole contraction. Sole contraction exists together with most other contractions. If you have bar contraction, a high bar, you also usually have sole contraction. If you have heel contraction and high heels or underslung heels, you also have usually sole contraction. It is one of those contractions that usually comes with everything else. A sole contraction means basically that there is too much sole to allow the hoof to expand upon weight bearing. It just keeps everything together. Fifth is bulb contraction. And what that means is that the bulbs here are just very narrow, close to non-existent. That is what we understand to be bulb contraction. The bulb is just not there, it's contracted. This one doesn't quite fit into the classification of contraction, and then again it does, and that becomes clearer when we talk about it in a specialized lecture. It's sheared heels. That means that one side of the hoof in the heel area is higher than the other side, and therefore has unphysiological lever forces on the hoof. It leads to contraction more. It is painful at times, most times, and it leads to other problems that are rather difficult to dissolve. So may it suffice here, there is such a thing, a pathology as named sheared heels. Number 7 is coronet contraction. We talk about coronet contraction when the hoof becomes directly under the coronet, smaller and is more drawn in. And this goes with a whole bunch of other things in the hoof. Just suffice it to say there is such a thing like coronet contraction. This contraction has a long name, and also somebody came up with an abbreviation that's almost as difficult as the long name. When we have a hoof situation like this, we talk about unilateral contraction beyond the vertical, or ULCBV. Unilateral contraction beyond the vertical. What that means is that instead of diverging or being upright, the hoof is actually inside the vertical. Here we have the same thing. Instead of being upright or diverging, the hoof is inside the vertical. On one side, because the other side is diverging in both cases. So this is unilateral contraction beyond the vertical, or ULCBV. And then we have bilateral contraction beyond the vertical. Now the same thing happens on both sides of the hoof. Bilateral contraction beyond the vertical, or BLCBV. A contracted hoof, and this is a general statement, is one whose form has been altered so that part or all of the hoof either does not expand on weight bearing or actually becomes more narrow on weight bearing. We are only concerned with what happens with the hoof on weight bearing, always. There is no other concern. If the hoof is not weight bearing, it's of no concern what it does. But if it becomes upon weight bearing, either in part, which means just one part of it, or in its whole, it does not expand or it becomes even more narrow, then we talk about contractions in the hoof, or a contracted hoof. These contractions constrict the blood vessels, nerves, bones, cartilage, tendons, and ligaments within the hoof. This leads to compression and or inflammation of the front and or the lateral lamellar corium. Also the solar corium and parts of the lateral cartilage. Contracted heels also cause painful compression of the bulbs of the heel. What you see here again is a hoof with severe heel contraction. Contraction really compromises every single part of the hoof. After removing the shoes and proper trimming, these alterations may show themselves as pain. Sufficient blood flow returns to the hoof, the nerves regenerate and report the damage that is already in existence for a long time. We had talked in the histology lecture how nerve function can only happen with circulation. And when you reintroduce circulation into the hoof, because you are removing some of the contracted parts, like the sole that is way too thick, or you take the heel down, or whatever you do, may introduce some more circulation into the hoof and may show as pain. And I'm putting an emphasis on may. We're getting to this in a moment. The more the hoof deviates from the form of a normal healthy hoof, the more painful it is. The horse walks stilted, carefully, or lame. And now you are introducing more blood flow, so all of a sudden this horse says, holy moly, I can feel all the damage in the hoof. However, trimming in such a way that you keep the horse as sound as possible while facilitating corrections is the hallmark of a skilled hoof care provider. I want to say this again, and this is really not easy. Trimming in such a way that you keep the horse as sound as possible while facilitating corrections. It is not possible to trim a hoof and keep it in a holding pattern and just say, oh, I'm just going to do a little bit and we're not going to make any changes. You have to bite the bullet somewhere. It's a little bit like setting a bone. When you have a complicated fracture, unless you have anesthesia, it will hurt. It will hurt a lot. But without setting the bone, you have no prayer of getting your limb straight again that was broken. So you have to make corrections and you have to keep working on it and not be afraid that the horse may feel the damage that was in his hoof. Always remember, when you are trimming, the damage that was in the hoof is not your fault, unless you created it. But if you come in as a trimmer or you have a horse with problems, you start trimming now. I'm not advocating to hurt the horse, not by any stretch of imagination. But it may very well happen that when you start trimming, that the horse will feel more of his hoof and therefore will react to the pain. And that brings us to the question, what does a horse do when he is lame? Is he going, we know he has no sound for pain, but when he shows lameness, is he going ow, 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 or is he moving in such a way that he tries to avoid the pain in the best way possible? This is how I get lame. When somebody sees that I am lame, this is because I'm moving in a way that allows me to have the least possible pain. And that usually involves a limp. If something happens, like a horse just jumped on the middle of my foot, and then I just kind of gimp around, or I just twisted my ankle again, and I gimp around in order to avoid the pain. The pain is there, you cannot help this, and helping it with pain medication is therefore another chapter, or we can discuss it in the question and answer. By nature, sorry, well, I got a little bit ahead of myself. Once contraction has turned into navicular syndrome, termed as a mysterious degenerative disease, treatment is experimental. Usually the prognosis with such treatment is 50-50 at best, and the usability of the horse is only for a limited time. When you go to a conventional veterinarian with your lame horse, he will use some hoof testers, and once he has used the hoof testers, he will probably make some x-rays, and he will use the shape of the navicular bone among other markers to diagnose this horse has navicular syndrome. It is basically just saying the navicular bone is showing me that the horse has in this area some problems. What the problem exactly is, we don't know, but heel pain indicates in some way navicular syndrome as well. So our experience, and I'm talking here strictly from a conventional viewpoint, our experience is that if we give the horse a painkiller and an anti-inflammatory, it may get better. Give it a few days, give it 4 days of butazolidine, and the horse will get better. And then we see how he is after that. So that's step 1. Step 2, we add isoxaprine, another drug that I believe thins the blood. That may help. Step 3, do not move him a lot because that aggravates the heel pain. That makes it worse. So the horse goes on partial or full stall rest. Next step, let's put a wedge pad between the shoe and the heel, or let's put a elevated heel on the shoe. This is what you see here in the picture. The shoe is actually here a little bit higher than it is here. So that's that kind of shoe. So now we have the horse in wedge pad, on medication, on stall rest, but every time you take him out and you work him a little bit, or he runs around by himself a little bit, he comes up lame again. This is the classical symptom for navicular syndrome. And the next step is, because you still want to ride this horse and you have paid a lot of money for this horse and you want to use him. So the next step is that you do a neurectomy, and that means that here where the nerve runs, the veterinarian takes a huge part of this nerve out on both sides, not just on the inside but on the other side as well, so that the body has a hard time to grow these nerve endings together again. They will grow together eventually. Eventually this horse will feel pain again. But this gives you maybe another year now with a horse that cannot feel pain in the hoof at all. But as soon as the nerve endings have found a way together again, because the body does repair itself, we have the same problem again. And that is then the end of the conventional route. We do a little bit something different. We trim the hoof so that it can come back to full function, and then hopefully it doesn't have too much scar tissue on the inside, because usually these navicular horses come to us when they are already everything else has been tried. And my experience is that when a horse has been for quite a while medicated and still be ridden, and nerve neurectomy and still be ridden, the inflammation actually never goes away. And the inflammation on the that involves the impar ligament, the navicular bursa, the deep digital flexor tendon, and all the blood vessels in that area will eventually the body will stabilize that area by scarring it over with scar tissue. And when you have scar tissue there, then it's really, really hard to break this loose again and to actually get this horse moving again. It's really tough. And sometimes it's hopeless. But that you only can do so much when you don't get the horse early on. So much about navicular syndrome. By the way, I have met one time a lady that's brought a horse and had me trim the horse, and the horse was sound in one trim. And she said this horse was not diagnosed with navicular syndrome, it was diagnosed with navicular disease. I really question very much if there is such a thing as navicular disease, unless the navicular bone on the insertion points of the impar ligament has changed so dramatically that it has actually ossifications on the navicular bone, and that could be maybe termed as disease. I don't know. Dr. Cook will tell us later on. I hope so. Okay. By nature, the hoof has a tendency to become narrow. This is necessary in order to withstand the constant force expanding it with every step. Hoof mechanism and shock absorption are accomplished through the horse's weight and the impact of each step expanding the hoof capsule against the resistance of the ground. If for any reason this expanding force is lacking, the hoof will become over time more narrow. That means contracted. If for any reason the horse is not moving or is shod, the hoof will become more contracted. And you see here in this picture a little bit, this is a horse I still have with me. He came with shoes and was rather underslung and had a huge bulge here in the hoof capsule. And over time, he's with me now 2 years, we got him a fairly decent hoof capsule. Disregard this up here. Had some rope burn. I let them sometimes walk around with halters and lead lines on, so that I can get them in the walker altogether. And he meanwhile tangled himself up. Some horses are more talented than others. So that's what happened. Just in case you see this and you're wondering what this is. How can we prevent contraction in the first place? A horse with insufficient movement and or unnaturally soft terrain will develop contracted hoofs. No movement, soft terrain will develop contracted hoofs. Some adaptation to softer terrain is possible as long as there is sufficient movement and the horse is barefoot. In most cases, mechanical forces like high heels and or shoes are added to the problem, increasing both the speed at which the hoof becomes contracted and the severity of deformation. This here is such a hoof that is already severely deformed. It has long underrun heels. They are, remember when we talked about hoof form, this is a long heel, not necessarily a high heel. He has heel contraction. He's very narrow here. If you extend the lines here out of the collateral groove. They do not come outside the heel bulbs. He has definitely thrush. We will talk about thrush way later. And, well, the rest of it I would name neglect, because he's obviously not well taken care of. He also has sole contraction and bar contraction. Just to point this a little bit out, what all can go wrong in a hoof. And knowing what you are looking at gives you a better idea what to fix first. And it is not so difficult to learn how to classify the contractions. It is so much more difficult to make a decision every time when to trim what and what you cannot trim, because it will make other things worse. We will talk about every one of them, and I hope you will remember them. Breed proper terrain and sufficient movement at any age, foals from the day they were born, helps to prevent contraction. Natural boarding conditions with enough space and reason for sufficient movement on breed-appropriate terrain helps to prevent contraction. This may require riding, driving, ponying to make up the natural amount of movement each day. What I have put together here are pictures of unborn foal feet. This is, on the right side, this is an embryo picture, and you see the hind feet are very narrow and spade-like, and so are the front feet, because they have to go through the birth canal without injuring the dam. So the same thing here. This is really the hoof of a fetus, and when the horse is born, he has some of this still around the tip of his hoof capsule, and there is some fuzz here. This fuzz is all still on the bottom of the hoof, and as soon as the horse stands up, this falls off, but it helps to prevent injury during the birthing process. Natural amount of movement. We have talked about a little bit, I don't know if it was in this lecture, but about what Brian Hansen has found, that horses move between 8 miles and 50 miles a day. So he really hasn't made a statement. It highly depends on how much food the horse finds. Horses do not move more than they need to sustain their hunger. But if water and food source are far apart, then they will move more. If they have enough room to move and have interaction with the herd, they also will move a little bit more. How further on to prevent contraction? By physiologically correct trimming at the necessary intervals, or natural wear through sufficient movement on appropriate terrain. Definitely no shoes. This comes again and again and again, and it will not go away. This movement and movement and movement. There is no way to not move a horse and hope that he will stay sound. It's not happening. Dr. Strasser always told a story about this, and I kind of like that comparison. She said one day, and I was a little bit flabbergasted in a seminar when I heard it the first time, she said, "You know, I really love seals. I think they're the cutest thing in the world. and I have a bathtub at home, and I'm going to get a seal, and I'm going to put the seal in the bathtub, and I can spend half an hour, some days, on the weekends, even an hour playing with the seal. And everybody held their breath. What is this about? She was right. You can no more having a seal in a bathtub than a horse that doesn't get enough movement. Taking the horse out of its natural environment and putting it in a stall, bedded high with shavings or straw or what have you, and naming this good horsemanship is an abomination. And there is no excuse for it. If you cannot give the horse a lifestyle that it needs, then do not have a horse. Horses are luxury items, animals, luxury animals. You do not have to have one. If you have a riding facility and you think you have to have a horse in order to teach because this is all you know, you can make just as much money by being a greeter at Walmart, and they take everybody without an education. So this is not an excuse either. Keeping horses in stalls is only admissible if you do not know any better. But as soon as you know, you have to let them out. And this is part of the whole reason for this course here. This is just another picture of before and after trim. And this is honestly right before and after. I did this myself, so I can say. Another way to prevent contraction: daily immersion of the hoofs in water past the coronet band for at least 15 minutes. Ideally, the horse has a natural water source where he will immerse his hoofs during drinking. Or he will just play around like these guys here. I think this is a fantastic picture. It just has so much life in it. And let's go and run through the water. This is taken in the Camargue, the Rhone Delta in France, in the south of France, where there live these white horses, and mostly wild. They are used for cattle herding, but they live a lot in water. They have lots of water there. So, and they don't look unhappy at all. Prevention of contraction due to injury. Trim bare hoofs properly, immerse frequently in water. Keep the horse moving as much as possible on terrain the horse can accept. Hoof boots may help in some cases to maximize movement. Physiotherapy, massage, acupuncture may help to speed up healing. Most important, when you have an injured hoof, don't forget, over the injury, may this be a laceration or what have you, that you still have to trim that hoof. I have a horse in my care. He belongs to the family now, who has massive ring bone on the right hind due to an injury as a foal when his entire hoof care was neglected. And only if we move him every day religiously, he goes for an hour at the walk and the trot into the walker. This means he trots for half an hour and he walks for half an hour. Only then is he reasonably sound. If we neglect this, which we have tried, therefore we know, for only a week or two, he becomes very stiff again and his movement is markedly lame. So, when you have an injured horse, keep moving the horse as much as possible. The picture here is a hoof from Overland from the Swedish Hoof School. Very nice hoof, no thrush. Bars are pretty much where they belong. They could be a little bit shorter, but it's a functioning hoof. White line is closed. It is a hind hoof. Looks very good. I really like this. So I want to share it with you so you don't all see sick hoofs. It's rather depressing. I've said this already. All forms of contraction have one thing in common. The hoof caps becomes more narrow upon weight bearing instead of expanding on weight bearing, or it doesn't expand. Even so, every hoof is different. We still can give some general advice on trimming contracted hoofs. Hoofs are relatively small compared to the size of the horse's body, but they do have to deal with rather large forces. Problems occur when the correct conditions are not given. Correct conditions means terrain, movement, soaking. The necessary basic form must be recognized. An unhealthy form must be stated and addressed. Even if every hoof is slightly deviating from the ideal, the basic function must be observed. Before you attempt to treat a contracted hoof, you must first assure that the horse will have the correct living conditions. If you trim a hoof to the parameters that we will give you in the following lectures, and you do not have the correct living conditions, which means you trim that hoof and then you put the horse in a stall on bedding, for example, that hoof will collapse instead of expand. Take my word for it. I've seen it happen again and again and again. The hoofs must be trimmed at frequent intervals in such a way that the hoof capsule can broaden. You also must know how to trim in such a way as to not keep the horse overly inflamed for too long a period of time. The existing inflammation should go down before you trim again. By not raising the inflammation level even further with every new trim, the recovery of the horse can be much faster and less painful. In translation, that means trim often but not a lot. So don't trim every structure of the hoof, but if you have, for example, a hoof like this here that you see here, trim it every 2 weeks and take those heel points back that you can get always a little bit further on this horse. Trim often but not a lot, so you don't inflame this hoof over and over and over again, because every time you go in with a massive trim in a contracted hoof, you will reintroduce more blood flow, more circulation, therefore more inflammation. So be careful there. Inflamed hoofs especially must pump regularly. That means they have an absolute need for constant but quiet movement, day and night. Running around is not conducive to healing. So if you have a horse that has inflamed hoofs, put him out with a quiet horse. Make sure that he doesn't run. You cannot tie them down. You have to let them move. Moving them in hand is a very good way to ensure quiet, decent movement. Until the inflammation has subsided, the horse should be kept on smooth, firm, non-concussive ground or on flat pasture, not on rocks or concrete. Vibrations are additionally painful and slow down healing. Very hard ground vibrates the hoof. The horse owner must show consideration for the horse at this time and refrain from riding or driving for a while. I find this often very, very difficult to convey to the owner. Please do not ride this horse. But I want to ride. No, he really needs to recover. But I want to ride. It's not what you want to do, it's what the horse needs. And this is when we usually part ways, because I can't handle this. My diplomatic forces are getting slimmer and slimmer. So I was very lucky in the beginning when we didn't have a hot walker or a walker. I met this lady who had a severely foundered horse, 24 and 28 degrees rotation in the front feet. And he stayed with us for 8 months, and she had 2 teenage daughters that she was homeschooling. And we made a deal because she also said she had no money, which I found out later wasn't true. She just didn't want to spend it. But that's a different story. And she came for 8 months, 6 times a week, with some small exceptions. Brought her 2 kids along and hand walked the horses for an hour. So there were 6 arms, and so 6 horses could be moved for an hour. And they got moved at the speed that they could go. And it really helped with the recovery of these horses. Last, I want to share with you my rules for riding. It is without a question that a horse gets moved more when he is ridden than when he is hand-walked. I have never seen somebody who couldn't ride longer and go farther on horseback than by foot. Here's what I tell my clients if they have sore horses. First of all, if you have a sore horse, do only ride it in straight lines as much as possible. Also walk it in straight lines as much as possible. Because when the hoof twists, the lamella always gets a little bit challenged. So if the horse walks in hand, perfectly normally forward and has no whatsoever problems, then sit on him and see if he still can walk like this. And this is the picture I took here of one of the girls that helped out with walking. They rather walked like this. Sit on the horse, and if the horse still walks the same like he has been in hand, then you can ride him. Then the additional weight does not bother him. But if he gets short-strided as soon as you get on him, then he cannot handle the additional weight on his back, and you have to get off. Also, it depends very much on the ground that you have to ride on, because it is very different from facility to facility, from place to place. Our ground is like carpet all around. This is 23, 24 years ago we bought the property because of that. Because we had for short horses, and I didn't know this at the time, but it was ideal footing, not a rock in sight. Coastal Bermuda grass, long established, very, very cushy, and on a sand clay mix, which drains well, but also holds enough moisture so that the grass can grow. Perfect footing for the lame horse, for the herding horse, for the inflamed horse. But not everybody has this, and then hoof boots may come into play. Anything you can do to make the horse move. And this will conclude today's lecture so far. Any questions are welcomed. I would like to start with Dr. Cook and his take on navicular syndrome. Hello, Bob.
Yes, hello. This is a long and difficult topic, of course, navicular disease, and a touchy topic. I'm afraid the nomenclature has been very faulty for a very long time. Excuse me. I'll come back to you if I may.
I'll catch you later.
Um, sorry about the interruption. Navicular disease as a name for a problem is a ragbag collection. It's a catch-all terminology. Navicular syndrome, I'm sure, is a better term than navicular disease, but I'm not even very keen on the word syndrome. That too is indicative in my mind of a rather woolly diagnosis. A more honest diagnosis would be heel pain, just simply that. And years ago, long before natural hoof care was being practiced, I remember being in a position as a member of faculty having to give a seminar on navicular disease, and in preparing for this, I did some study. It wasn't sufficient, of course, in that period, but I was ignorant and didn't know anything about it, or didn't know enough about it. But I remember providing as the starter to this seminar a definition of navicular disease as being any disease of the navicular bone other than fracture was navicular disease.
Oh, okay.
And that was a very unsatisfactory definition, of course, but that's where it was. Later on in my experience, I spent some time at Newmarket at the Animal Health Trust, and a young graduate came and joined us there whilst I was on the strength, by the name of Chris Collis, and it was he who first promoted the idea of giving isoxaprine to the horse for navicular syndrome. His idea was based on the hypothesis that navicular syndrome was caused by obstruction of blood vessels in the hoof. Just one final comment, if it is going to be a final comment, Claudia, with regard to what you were so rightly talking about concerning an owner's responsibility, if they can't keep a horse in adequate condition or provide the necessary requirements for a healthy life, they shouldn't be keeping a horse at all. And I think you then mentioned very quickly that the only excuse was ignorance. Once people knew, then they had no excuse. I'd like just to expand on that a moment, because I think we can take a lesson here from the situation, the legal situation in court. Ignorance of the law is not a defense in court, and I would like to put forward the idea that ignorance of what is required to keep a horse healthy is not a defense either. If you're going to keep an animal, it's your responsibility to learn as much about how to keep such an animal as you can, and certainly to be aware of your responsibility and to teach yourself or make sure that you learn the necessary things that have to be done. So, and in fact, I think I'm right in saying that the new animal welfare bill that has been introduced in England, for example, in the last few years, makes that statement very clear, that owners have this responsibility, that the onus is on the owner to be educated, and that ignorance is not an excuse. That's essentially my contribution, Claudia, unless you have some other ideas or thoughts you want me to comment on.
No, I thank you very much, Bob. This was helpful, and it's always good to hear somebody else's view. The reason why I said this about ignorance is because there is a whole different world out there, and if we are for a long time in hoof care and all of a sudden we only know people that are also into hoof care or that are also into having their horses out. I haven't met anybody in the last 5 years, I want to say, who has his horses in. You know, everybody I meet says, oh, I always had my horses out. So, but I myself came up in Germany in an entire system where learning was, boy, it was important. And we learned, we sat in the bleachers all day long if we could, and we were quiet and we were respectful and we were trying to learn, but look from whom we learned. Even as professionals, we learned that horses, and I graduated in 73, so long time ago, that horses could perfectly be fine being tied to the wall. This was the scenario at the German riding school in Warndorf. It has since been abolished, but at the time this was our reality. And we had our nose in the books, and there was not a book that I was not forced, but that I was supposed to read that said you have to turn your horse out 24/7. Your horse has to move all the time in order to stay healthy. That's what I meant with that
Yes.
kind of ignorance. It's not that, oh, you have heard it but you don't believe in it. No, that's not. And I do agree with you. If you do keep today, in today's time, a 1,200-pound animal, you should educate yourself about the needs. And we have actually a minimum needs law, or it's not a law, it's a recommendation on the books here in South Carolina that spell out that the horse should be outside, have access to the outside with adequate shelter and at least one other animal, one other equine as company.
Good. Yes.
Yeah, it's there, but it isn't enforced, and it isn't. And I think you're right. Not only is the horse owner responsible to do the right thing by their horse, but I think we all, as everyone who's in this class, everyone who is connected to us, is responsible to politely, but without making beating around the bush, educating people that do not have their horses out and that do not give their horses adequate living conditions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's with knowledge comes responsibility.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. It was very helpful. I appreciate your input.
You're welcome.
I will cook up another question, no pun intended, for you next time. Denise in Spain with the birds.
Yeah, there they go. Yeah, that's a lot of responsibility for me. There's where I am. I moved my horse last year out of a stall situation. You know, it's a huge complex, and you know, there's literally hundreds of horses stalled 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
7 days a week. And it's normal.
It's
Yeah.
normal. Yeah.
It's normal.
It's as normal as
In fact, you know, they feel they're giving better care to their horses that are cleaned up daily than I'm giving my horse that's now out 24/7.
yeah.
So I'm the harsh one by keeping them out in the winter.
Yeah. You know, I just said this morning in the morning I said this in the morning lecture. When you probably have a hard time saying anything to these people. You know, because they don't want to hear you're talking about your barefoot horse outside again. That you don't even take good care of because you don't buy him clothes and you don't do all the things that they do. But maybe you can go on Wednesdays and say, I learned something yesterday that I really thought was so cool, or something in that neighborhood. You know, and talk to them
Yeah.
just about what you have learned. As a
Yeah,
friend,
no, I do regularly say, like, I do make the comments, and, you know, um, about a month ago I put the pea gravel down in the field, just a part of the field, and the interest was really great, you know. But again, they're looking at me, you know, really weird, and like the comments I get is, well, I don't know. It just continues, basically.
Yeah.
But hey, hopefully I'll lead by example. Hmm.
yes, and hopefully we can give you enough backbone here to keep on doing what you're doing. And anybody, I have maybe said that already, if any one of you wants to, has the opportunity to speak to a group of people, I'll be more than glad to share PowerPoint presentations. If you just tell me what you want to talk about, I make up the presentations for you and I send them to you so that you can use them. I'll be more than glad to have you help with that, because we need every single one to talk about this for the good of the horse. So if you have an opportunity at your riding club or anywhere to, it doesn't help to preach to the choir, but like you, Denise, are in a actually perfect situation that you could talk maybe just about anatomy. You know, not about, don't talk to them about taking the shoes off, but if you can talk about anatomy and talk about hoof mechanism, they can draw their own conclusions.
No, with my horse, you know, I do some dressage lessons with him. Obviously, he's the only one barefoot.
Yeah.
So I do, one of the instructors, I say, well, come and look at my feet, you know, and like the great big paddy frog pads that he has, you know. And compared to the PREs, the Andalusian horses, with the huge high heels and
Yeah.
completely contracted, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's such a contrast, you know. It's so I'm offering the insight, maybe, yeah. So.
But let me inject something here. If you show it to a single person, that single person, you have told them, but you have made it personal to them. If you talk to a group, you can speak about something and it's not personal. It's just a thought.
Yeah.
So if you, again, if anyone, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 countries here represented out of 5 participants today. 4 different countries. So, and Bob is on the west coast and Pam is on the, Bob is on the east coast and Pam is on the west coast. So, everyone, if you just get a small group of people and they say later on, we learned something that was rather interesting, and if you have good pictures, you can make it interesting. And do what I do, write a script before. There's a few lectures in the very beginning, the anatomy lectures I can do without a script, but then later on, in order not to get lost, I need a script. Or I muck it up somewhere and lose my way. I could talk for hours about something that is getting less and less relevant to the theme of the day. Thank you, Denise.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. Katarina.
Yes. Well, I'm also at a place where we have only shod hooves. Unfortunately, I'm also at a very hostile place. Actually, 2 weeks ago, one lady at our barn took the shoes off her horse, and I was almost physically attacked, even though I do not ride this horse, and I only am friends with this lady. But I was threatened. They were threatened to call the SPCA on me, and because we, you know, the horse. They wanted the horse to stay in the stall because he had no shoes. So if you touch that horse, we're going to call the police, we're going to call the SPCA, we're going to, you guys are, this is animal torture. And I just showed up at the barn. I didn't even know what was going on. So, yeah, I got yelled and screamed at, and it was pretty bad for about a week. But this horse he's leaving. He's going to a place where he's going to be living in a 24/7 outside in a small herd. But he's still at our barn at this moment. But just for the 2 weeks. But it was. I mean, even the owner. I mean, I had to call her and say, I need to warn you when you come here. You need to be ready because these people are very. I mean, they were screaming at me. I mean, they were yelling. I mean, when I took the horse out, I had to actually walk and take the horse back in because I thought the man who works at the barn was going to hit me. I mean, he was so aggressive, and I thought, let's just put the horse back in. Let's just calm down a little bit until the dust settles, and then we can take him out again. But let's, calm down. And I mean, it was bad. I mean, and he tracked me down later in the same village, and my husband luckily was driving by with the car, and he stopped the car and came out and was like, leave my wife alone. This needs to stop. I mean, I can't believe the emotions that people come up with when somebody takes the shoes off their horse. I mean, I was completely floored.
It's not just taking the shoes off the horse when somebody does something else that makes them very uncomfortable. This is how the crusade started.
Yeah. I was so shocked. I mean, and this is all, I mean, I speak French fairly fluently, but when I didn't even understand some of the stuff people were yelling at. I mean, which was maybe a good thing because I was, I don't know if I want to understand what you're saying at me at this point. I mean, name calling, I mean, literally saying they're going to call the animal, rescue people because this horse, has no shoes on. And it really did open my eyes to see, where we're at here with some people. So I was floored. So I think we're kind of far away from doing like a group lecture at this point.
But maybe you could expand on this a little bit on your blog. I don't know how many subscribers you have to the blog, and usually you're preaching to the converted. But if you send me the text of the blog, I'll be glad to post it extra on Facebook. I have, for no good reason other than to expand hoof care knowledge, 1,750 friends on my Facebook page, and on the Equine Soundness Facebook page we have, I think, 1,300 or so. So I could share it there with your permission, and whenever you come up with something.
Yeah, when you see the link on my page, the Facebook page, you can share it onto your page. I definitely don't mind. Yeah. I mean, I wish the whole world would read it.
Yeah, if you could also post it onto the Equine Soundness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I cannot link to this. I can share it on there. I can only copy it onto there, and then it comes up all funny looking. So that's just beside the point. But I see why you cannot lecture next week at your barn. I don't think that would fly.
No. I think I would. It would be a very hostile environment, and I would be afraid for my life at this rate.
Well, I hope that this all settles down once this horse has left, and then maybe you can figure out what makes these people tick. At some point I would like to talk to you a little bit more about this, but I don't want to bore everybody else with it. Thank you, Katarina. This was very insightful again. Christina in Finland?
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, it was a good lecture, I think, and really interesting, this whole variation of contractions, and I immediately started to think about my horse, and I looked for some pictures which I have here in my computer that, this kind of stuff he has also. So
Okay.
it was interesting. Yeah, and I liked your idea about these lectures and spreading the knowledge of this barefoot horses, and I think we have kind of same situation in Finland, that only very few horses are without shoes, and mostly all have shoes. And I think, for example, last weekend we have this open door day in our stable, a part of a kind of occasion in that county where the stable is, and lots of people who don't know horses so well came to the stable to look at the horses and see the horses, and when they find out that the horses there, they don't have shoes, the first question was it like, yeah, are they also going to be without shoes in winter? Because I think the winter time here in Finland is the kind of a question and issue what people think about when they think about barefoot horses, because usually we have so much ice and we have these shoes, and then I don't know what they are in English, but these pikes, that kind of things what help, they are put to the shoes and then they help the horse to walk on ice. I don't know, Katharina might know it in English what I'm trying to explain.
Studs, yes.
Studs, yes, studs, yeah, I don't know the word.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but and so the barefoot thing here in Finland is quite uncommon, and people are, the first thing what they are worried about is the winter time. And actually that was one of my biggest worries also when I had my horse still with shoes, and when I think that, yeah, maybe I should take the shoes off, but then the first worry in my mind at that time was also, but what about in the winter time?
Yeah.
But I think there are good solutions also for that, and people just need to know about them.
Well, you know, we talked briefly about this when we talked about hoof function, that the bare hoof actually has a suction cup effect on slippery surfaces, and ice is one of them. And the other thing is that a hoof with correct hoof mechanism expels the snow and the ice paddies with every step. And ice packing up in the hoof that we had so much problems with when we have shoes on. So
yeah, that's a really big problem.
Yeah, that we in the winter time had the horses shod with rubber rims on the inside of the shoe.
Same thing in Finland.
Yeah, so that the snow could not pack up in there against the shoe. And actually the horses that didn't have that were, if they were ridden outside, they were walking on stilts up to a foot high, where the ice had packed into the hoof, and you had to get off the horse in the middle of nowhere and take a hoof pick and pick this out. This doesn't happen with barefoot feet that are correctly trimmed. I have to say this. If you have a very contracted hoof that doesn't spread and doesn't move, then it happens probably just the same or similar to this.
Yeah.
But if you have a correctly trimmed hoof, it will expel the snow in no time. And that in itself, you know, showing this in diagrams and would make a valuable lecture for people to just say the dangers of riding in snow in the winter, and then make a comparison barefoot to shod. And
and mostly we have lots of indoor arenas here.
Yeah.
I mean, almost in every at little bit bigger stable, they have this indoor arena, so it doesn't matter there. I mean, for example, last winter when it was quite slippery and my horse was the first winter without shoes, I always walked him, not ride him, to the indoor arena and just rode there in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then when it was more snow, no more ice, but a lot of snow. Then it was fun riding in the snow because the snow is not slippery. The ice is
right.
only the ice.
Yeah.
The ice is the only one which is slippery. And then when it got so much snow here in Finland, it was really lots of fun and nice to ride on the snow. But it was a short period of time when it was ice. But then if you have an indoor arena, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know. The horses go. I mean, if you live somewhere else and have to walk through to the indoor arena, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But most indoor arenas have the barn directly adjacent, and you don't even have to go outside, and you just go from the stall into the arena. This is the other world out there, you know, and especially in cold climates, people who have horses have usually enough money to band together or board their horses at stalls that have indoor arenas, and it's not an issue. The whole thing is not an issue, which makes you wonder altogether why a horse that goes from the stall into the soft arena needs shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
This is the same question that I'm asking about that we discussed, I think, last time about the bit. Why does a horse need to go as a 3-year-old when he runs around and bucks and has no notion of how to stop or anything? You have a snaffle on him, but then when he is a seasoned 12-year-old and has really some good moves on him and has learned to be absolutely obedient, now you put 2 bits and a curb chain on him.
Yeah.
So some things just don't make sense, and sometimes we have to ask hard questions and just say, wait a minute, you are not moving your horse anywhere outside where he needs shoes. You're not riding on the trail for several hours. Can't you take in the winter time the shoes off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just, I have been also a vaulting coach, but I'm not continuing it. I have done it so many years, almost 22 years or so.
Wow.
But I think the last thing what we are going to have a kind of training session. But I invited all the vaulting people, all the girls and the vaulters, the horse owners, the lunchers, the trainers, everybody. I invited them to that place where my horse lives now, because I wanted to have that training day there, so they can see this kind of a place where horses live outside all the time, and it's a really fancy place because it's a new one. And where we have horses who don't have the shoes at all, like 27 horses without shoes, and all of them living in a big herd outside. And I think that is also kind of education to the vaulting people, in a way, to come that kind of place and to see that, yeah, it's impossible also here in Finland to have this kind of places and different kind of settings for horses. And I think that is also a really important thing, that people should see a different ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you can show somebody a place where horses are happy, healthy, curious, feeling good, their coats are shiny, and they are barefoot, despite the fact that they're out 24/7, then they cannot say, well, but we don't want these woolly boogers. You know, these horses that have long coats and they're sweating when they have to go in training and all these things. You know, they have.
And we have also in our and we have also in our stable we have competition horses. They are not, my horse is a kind of hobby horse and my friend, and we do whatever we want or not to want. But we have also there in that place also competition horses. Who have show jumping horses, dressage horses, and these 3-day event horses, also in quite high level, living in these settings and living without shoes. And I think that is also important for people to see that not all the barefoot horses or these outside living horses, that they are not just hobby horses or something.
I wonder if you are done with your coaching career in vaulting, which I know must have taken an enormous amount of time, if you haven't
Yeah.
freed up now some time, that you could become an advocate for vaulting horses barefoot and bitless.
Yeah, yeah, because I have now 2 times actually trained with my own horse. He's an ex-vaulting horse. We have trained without bit, without the bit, this vaulting thing, and it has went really well. It has
Okay.
been lots of fun for both of us, like
Yeah.
just for fun,
But I
for
just
old
kind
time's
of
sakes.
would like to take this to the American Vaulting Association as a whole seminar, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah, and
or,
it's also in,
you know,
yeah,
let's-
and it's in vaulting it is possible because in our rules we don't vaulting horses doesn't have to have a bit.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
excellent.
so it's the the only one actually, the only one.
So we're
it
gonna
was bought.
let's stick
Yeah.
our heads together between Bob and you and Katarina and me,
Yeah.
the vaulting people and the bitless guy, and see what we can come up with on putting a seminar together and offering it under a different label to the vaulting world.
Yeah. it would
Okay.
be fun. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for your input, Christina. And
Yeah, thank you.
last, but not least, we'll call on Pam. Hello, Pam.
Hello, Claudia. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, good. Actually, I have no questions about this lecture today, but I am definitely interested in doing a presentation to my 4-H group.
Uh-huh.
That would be wonderful if we could get something together for that.
Just tell me what you plan to talk about, and I see what I can come up with. I mean,
Well,
email this to me. Don't-
Yeah, I will do that.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
Just put your thoughts together, what you want to talk about, how long it's supposed to be, and you have to write the script yourself, but I'm gonna, unless I have something already done,
Okay.
but I can supply the pictures.
That would be great. I
Okay.
will definitely sit down and do that.
Excellent. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody else for spending time with me again, and I see you next week when we will continue on general thoughts about trimming, and then we will get into the details of all of this. Have a great day, great evening, and I see you next week. Goodbye.